Hello again. Hello again. This session I have really been looking forward to. I feel I say that every time. But this is close to my heart because this is about how fintech in my world are moving from being a vertical to something that's penetrating or underpinning every single industry. Fintech can create and shape new exciting business models. In this discussion, you will have the honor of meeting Carolina Velasco, Chief Strategist, Ecosystems and Partnerships from Grundfos. Siri Bursum, Global VP Finance Vertical, Eco Development and Partnerships from Huawei. David Chang, CEO at Blocknology Digital Ventures and Vice President, Shanghai Blockchain Association. So please give them a warm welcome. Also, John Yatusniak, President and CEO of UBX, part of the Union Bank of the Philippines. Go ahead. Welcome.
So I think actually we're missing one participant here.
Is
I am
Carolina
here. Hello.
There you are.
Am I blending with the
good.
background? Nice to virtually meet everyone today. As
Good,
Thomas
good.
introduced me, my name is Carolina Velasco, and I am the Chief Strategist of Grundfos within the Future Lab. I am very excited to talk about this topic as Grundfos enters this journey of how do we leverage fintech. But let me start, before I introduce my panelists, my fellow panelists, let me start by explaining and setting some ground rules of what we are talking about when we share sustainable finance. This is really about financial inclusion and how do we provide more access to more people in financial services, in addition to creating better trust and also lowering the cost of that. So with that shared, let me first kick things off with having David introduce himself. David?
Hi, I'm David Chan. I'm in Shanghai. It's afternoon time now. As Thomas said, I am a Vice President of Shanghai Blockchain Technology Association, and also I'm a co-founder of a cross-border technology investment and commercialization platform, Blocknology Digital Ventures. We work closely with international technology innovators to help them access Chinese market and also invest them in when they access Chinese market. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, David. Over to you, John.
Hi, yes, I'm John Janishak. I am with UBX. UBX is a technology innovation and a corporate venture capital arm that we spun out of Union Bank. So we're part of Union Bank of the Union Bank of the Philippines group. Union Bank is at least recognized here in the Philippines as the top digital bank in the Philippines, but was originally a traditional bank. So they're not a digital challenger bank. As I said, they're one of the top commercial banks, but they have digitized themselves to the core. And after digitizing the bank, we were thinking, what's next? What's the future? And for us, the future is one of invisible banking, where banking and financial services will just be seamlessly embedded into the activities and experiences that truly matter to people and to businesses. And so through our technology innovation, mostly platform building, which hopefully I'll get a chance to share a bit of that, and our venture capital arm. So if we're not building it, we're also investing in it.
Thank you, John, for the introduction. Over to Siri.
Yeah, so my name is Siri, and as I usually say, I'm not the iPhone app. And to make it a little bit more difficult and complicated, I come from Google after spending 12 years there working with the finance industry. What I do here at Huawei is overlooking the efforts that we're doing towards the app gallery and building the third global mobile ecosystem, and supporting the finance service in order to provide the users with better and more choice, basically. So it sounds easy, but it's not. I can tell you, it's a big job in terms of making sure that our all our users have the choice that they deserve, and that brings it also to the sustainability part that we're discussing.
Thank you, Suri. And that actually brings us to our first topic, which is how do industries leverage this? And we're going to start with David sharing a little bit on how is FinTech going to be either disrupting or helping contribute to what's going on for industry. David?
Thank you. As you know, we sit in China observing FinTech's evolution. I think the evolution is already happening where FinTech used to be a feature, particularly in China, is mostly about payment, to now a FinTech as an enabling technology to help any business, any individual who has trusted relationships, trusted communities to build business model on that. So case in point is Ant. So Ant used to be called Ant Financial. Their whole business model is on payment. And that Ant Financial evolved from being a payment company to being a financial life management. Now they manage every part of consumers' financial transaction, on investment, on credit, on lending, on payment. And they recently changed name before IPO from Ant Financial to Ant Group because they want to be a technology company that enables much more than just financial. So I think that's a great case in point. And Ant is not the only company doing so. There are a number of tech giants used to be in financial space, now are evolving into what I call the infrastructure play to enable more business model on top of that.
And David, what you're also talking on is a little bit what John shared a little earlier, which was this invisible banking. And John, I would love to hear your perspective on what David just shared on this area.
Yeah, I mean, I think what FinTech brings to the table in general, being digitally native, FinTech affords the opportunity to be or to embed or integrate financial services directly into the business systems of industry, of companies in virtually any industry, I guess. And so when you're integrated like that, the user experience obviously is much nicer. The banking or the financial services are not interrupting the task that the person is more interested in executing. And again, I think this applies in any industry. I'll give an example in a moment. But of course, this also, drastically, A, because it's digital, but B, because it's leaning on, or FinTech has the ability to sit on top of the natural distribution that, a business system in a given industry typically represents. So just to make this really concrete, I'll just share a quick example of something that we've done at UBX, but we are not alone in the FinTech community for this type of capability or thinking like this. So for example, in the Philippines, the most of the population is served by very small, what we call sari-sari stores, very small grocery stores in the community. And they are served by fast-moving consumer good companies. They have a well-established network of distributors. And so, for example, we've been able to integrate our lending. So we have virtualized lending, and we've embedded it into the system of the distributors. And these distributors go around with devices, and they go to the sari-sari stores, and basically the store owners, if they are out of cash, can get a loan on the spot in real time. They get credit to buy additional stock from the distributor. And so it's a very specific example, but what it's doing, first of all, it's making credit available. So it's including these store owners who would typically be excluded from, for example, reasonably priced credit. But it's also, it's also very inexpensive to deliver this this service to this particular clientele, because it's just embedded right into the system of, in this case, fast-moving consumer good distributors. So just an example.
Yeah, no, and it's a really valid example because we're touching on accessibility. We are also touching on lowering the cost of this. So, Suri, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add, or even David, you also feel free to chime in. I will do a gentle reminder to our audience right now, as you're thinking of things, a lot of questions pop up for me. Please do add them in the chat, and we would love to be able to answer them a little bit later. But this will actually transition us into the second part of our conversation for today, which is really focusing on, well, how are industries using this? And we have Siri here to tell us a little bit about their approach and why they're even stepping into this arena.
Well, I think that right now you can see that the big tech have are kind of leading this part of the industry. We see the traditional banks sitting, sort of looking at how they can improve their customer journeys or their customers' experiences. So I think that it is extremely important that we get new and more entrances into this field, because it is important for the health of the market, basically, and also the competition. Because we need to see improved customer experiences in this field, definitely. And how do you do that? You do that by bringing competition to the market, obviously, and therefore we need open APIs for the financial service that they can use in order to improve their contribution. Some will want to build it all the way out from start to end, and others will see how they can be part of one part of a transaction, like you and like you see with WeChat. Like you have those instant messages is the way you can sort of order a taxi. You don't have to open 3 or 4 apps in order to actually be able to get the ride and pay. So how can we as a company contribute to improving that customer experience is one of the things that we're working on, obviously. And we also see that in order to get there, we need a shift in attitude, because there has been over a long time, everyone sort of been talking about owning the client. The client actually has a life outside of their financial life, which is a much bigger part of their life than actually payment. So just to understand how payment should be, it should be convenient rather than an ownership. So that is what we're working on, and we're hoping that by, again, bringing competition into this market, we can also bring more partnerships, more innovation into this field.
And David, John, any other additional thoughts here?
Yeah, I see, in China, interestingly, there's this compromise happening. Well, obviously, regulators understand regulation on fintech is behind, and technology is happening so fast. Regulation is catching up, but it's very difficult for regulator to be to have the regulation, but also make sure that the new regulation don't choke technology innovation to death. So that's a challenge that regulator facing. And for traditional banks, it will be very difficult for them to reinvent themselves in a quick enough manner to catch up with the technology pace. Then for fintech companies, they don't want to be heavily regulated by the current regulation, which everybody knows are behind the curve. Right? So with those 3 forces, I think in China now is a compromise where regulators say, hey, why not XYZ big bank? Why don't you work with Ant Financial? Or ABC big bank? Why don't you work with Tencent? Okay, why don't you guys team up? because we don't know how to regulate. But I think the traditional banks should benefit from Ant Financial of the world, Tencent of the world, and Tencent, you should be able to benefit from a traditionally regulated environment under the big bank. So I think that's what's playing out now. I'm not saying this is a perfect solution, but it's a good compromise as every force is trying to feel their way out. What's the right future? No one knows what the right future is, but everybody is excited. So I guess that's what's happening in China.
Go ahead, John.
If I could, if I could just to add to what David's saying. I mean, I think the fintechs have the technology, the user experience, but don't forget, outside of big tech, the banks the traditional banks still often have the large customer bases. So there's a very nice synergy there, right? You're bringing, the fintech is bringing the better customer experience, as Siri was alluding to, the ability to perhaps integrate or make that experience more seamless. But they need to get it in front, or they need to acquire customers. And the traditional banks are actually a logical place to go for that. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to partner, and it can even go further than that. I mean, I would, to be maybe a bit provocative, I would suggest that the banks, today, at this point in time, for many of the fintechs, the banks can probably acquire them faster than the fintechs could acquire customers, right? So that partnership could be one that leads to outright acquisition. So I wanted to comment on David's piece, and if I could just quickly also comment a bit or add to what Siri was saying. We are seeing a lot of industries turning to fintech, particularly now. In the Philippines, the COVID, the pandemic, and I'm sure there's been a lot of talk about that, throughout this conference, online and offline. But we were severely locked down. The quarantine was quite restrictive. You needed a pass just to get out of your house, that sort of thing. And so, what are otherwise trying times is arguably a golden age for e-commerce, because how else are you actually going to do business? And so the e-commerce industry and all those things associated with it have really taken off here. And now how do we integrate fintech into that? So in our case, that lending platform that I talked about, we are working with Lazada, which is one of the big e-commerce platforms in the Philippines, to integrate that exact same lending platform so that merchants can get working capital in real time and on the spot. And again, then Siri mentioning competition. Even though we're owned by Union Bank, we offer loan products through the lending platform from a multiplicity of financial institutions. So we're agnostic when it comes to that. And John, that's another thing that fintechs do well.
Yeah, and actually one area that I've noticed we're focusing on is really on consumer products and services. And actually, this may be a great time for us to talk a little bit more about things that everyone needs on an everyday basis, which is water. And that's where Grundfos really starts chiming in here. And our purpose at Grundfos is really about pioneering new solutions for both water and climate action challenges and improving the quality of life of people. So when, looking at the ecosystems and partnerships of Grundfos, we have to start evaluating, well, how does a fintech really play into this? Obviously, the public side, there's regulation, there are areas that also privates can help support us, banking, but the fintech is an interesting area, and I think all of my fellow panelists have talked to you about that, but let me bring it into you from the world's largest pump manufacturer. Where we are thinking about is one, yes, the customer, but our customer actually falls into three different areas. We have the customer who's the facility manager of that water. Then that customer's customer is actually our consumer. So we are thinking of not only how do we get to that end user, but also how do we build a better relationship between the two, having and utilizing the depth of knowledge that we actually have over the past 75 years. So that's the first point that we're considering, or maybe I'm considering, on how to leverage fintechs. I think the second point is funding. When we go into these developing areas, we are unaware of what kind of resources are available. So funding is also an area that I would challenge fintechs to really look on. How are they helping support developing countries that need access to water and energy? The next point is a payment cycle. I think everyone has touched on this, on just how really busy and compact and quite bureaucratic this can be. But the payment cycle of moving, mobile payments, water vendors, currently what we are doing at Grundfos, but really challenging on, can we make that simpler and easier and at a lower cost? And my last point to add to this is really about digital currency, which is how do then we make that transaction? And that means, are we looking at tokenization? Are we looking at blockchain? Are we looking at virtual currency? And then that leads us into the layer of fintech. How is fintech then supporting blockchain technology? And what I will share is that right now we are also talking about this outside in. We have to, as industry, also look inside out, meaning are we ready to be able to take on these new fintechs and integrate them into our business? And if so, what does that look like? From a Grundfos perspective, we are hiring, and we just recently hired someone who has a vast knowledge in finance and how this area works. We have a whole team, the Safe Water team, that is focusing in this area and further helping build not only capacity building, but also local education and other areas. So I will say I'm going to leave that part for right there, but I want to bring in the rest of the group, because let's take a step back and think about industry at large. What else can industry be prepared or should be prepared for as if fintech enters in?
Well, I liked the comment about development. You talked about water. Mm-hmm. One area that we've looked at here in the Philippines is power, power distribution. These utilities have tremendous data. So when we talk about platforms, we always think about digital platforms, but don't forget that there's these legacy businesses that have a quote unquote platform, and they've been acquiring data for a long time. So for example, getting electricity usage or payment history from a utility that would allow a fintech to leverage that kind of alternative data to credit score to allow people to, for example, invest in solar. Yep. That is a perfect case study, I guess, around an industry way outside of banking. In this, you talked about water, in this case, power. But that's a perfect example of how fintech can be leveraged, and with a real net and a positive material impact is something like development.
And Siri, do you have anything to add on this topic specifically? I know we just have a few minutes left. I can see the clock running. But Siri, David, any additional thoughts here?
I personally think that we have such a long way to go. I mean, especially in Europe and in the US, we're still writing, especially in the US, we're writing checks. We're going into branches. We are dealing with finances still in a very traditional way compared to China. So I think we have a long way to go in order to improve this. And the way where I come from it is, how can we actually improve the user's daily lives? How can we make a user have a better economical situation, making finances easier for us as users? So coming from the technology world for the last sort of 12, 13
Oh,
Here.
Siri, I think we're losing you a little bit here at the end of your.
Putting the consumer more at center and making sure that how can actually actually improve the experiences for everyone, so that we can live a better financial life. And how can we get the user in a way that they haven't done before, taking into account the possibilities that you have the technology now, and not how everything was usually done.
Yeah.
So I think that is what I would challenge the industry with, is the consumer in the center, or the customer in the center, and also in looking at us from a different angle, not how we're used to looking at it.
And with that, believe it or not, 25 minutes is up. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists, Siri, David, John. I know this could have gone much longer, so feel free to continue sending those questions through. Tusen tack, mil gracias. Thank you for joining us, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.